But if they can't be charged, we will name them. And we will name them, and in a culture that respects shame, they should be people that are shamed.
And if they can be charged, we'll charge them. But if they can't be charged, we will name them.
How come they had more undercover agents there than were on trial in the Proud Boys case? In the Proud Boys case, the FBI agents who helped investigate and prosecute the January 6 cases are starting to freak out. They just submitted this notice into the District of Columbia. You may remember this case. They were suing the DOJ in two separate cases, and these were brought by a bunch of the lefty lawyers we've talked a lot about here. Norm Eisen in particular, you remember him, one of the architects behind a lot of the Trump lawfare, behind the Democracy Defenders Fund, okay? He's also joined by the other dude, Mark Zaid, who got his security clearance revoked by the president, and they are representing FBI agents. And the FBI came out, they filed a lawsuit pseudo-anonymously because they're so cowardly they can't even use their real names. They would, of course, attack the J6ers and post their names all over the internet. But when they have a problem and they want to get involved in litigation, they got to hide behind pseudonyms, okay? So they sued the DOJ in this one, and then the FBI has a union, essentially, an agents association that was also involved in suing the DOJ, and they submitted this notice, and the man who has them absolutely freaked out, Ed Martin, you know who he is. We got the clip of Ed Martin. He came out, of course, this was the guy we wanted to be the U.S. attorney in Washington, D.C. until that punk Tom Tillis, senator, came out and stalled and delayed and really sabotaged the entire operation. But he is now going over to the Weaponization Working Group, and he came out, held a press conference on his role, and this sent Norm Eisen and the lefty lawyers into an absolute tizzy. And so we'll go through this, but this is part of the video. We'll come back, we'll watch that from Ed Martin. And not only are they freaked that Ed is investigating them, but they're launching attacks of their own. And we'll follow up with this story because now Ed Martin is under investigation by Washington. Okay, so both sides are firing shots. It's ridiculous. But here's what the freaked out feds have submitted. They said, oh no, District of Columbia, DC District Court, help us. They said, here, we respectfully submit this notice of new information to update you about recent developments that may impact our case. Chiefly, we have this new person called Ed Martin. He was the former acting U.S. attorney for DC. We wanted him to become the permanent U.S. attorney there. Now that's going over to Jeanine Pirro as the new acting, and congratulations to her. We'll see if she gets confirmed permanently now that Tom Tillis is on board with her. But now he is going to be the Associate Deputy Attorney General, Ed Martin, and the head of the DOJ's Weaponization Working Group. They go, oh crap, we're the agents who weaponized the FBI against Americans. They held a press conference on Tuesday, May 13th, where he asserted his intent to name and shame individuals who participated in the January 6 investigations. We've been wanting to know who they are for a long time, and if they're such honorable people who acted with integrity and acted above the law and weren't weaponizing their office, what are they so freaked out about? All they've got to do is just show us your books. Open it up. We'll see inside there that you were following the proper procedures, the manuals, you were identifying witnesses appropriately, you were not colluding with other corrupt agents internally inside the agency. So you're good. We're not going to have any problem with you as long as you followed the law, because as you told us, no one's above the law after you got done raiding people's houses who were invited into the Capitol. So they are now worried. They say during the press conference, which we'll listen to a snippet of it, Martin discussed his new role as captain of the Weaponization Working Group. Footnote 1, they write here, saying that they're going to shame individuals if they can't charge them with crimes coming out of this office, saying it was recorded on C-SPAN and now it's available to view online. We'll watch it. As noted in our first lawsuit by the pseudonymous feds, the Weaponization Working Group was established on February 5, 2025 through a memorandum published by the United States Attorney General called Pam Bondi. What's up, Pam? And said that the working group specifically identified January 6 investigators as one of its categories of targets because we've got questions about their ethics and their criminal behavior and why they seemingly colluded to charge a slew of J6ers with crimes that were thrown out by the Supreme Court much later. But of course, that was after they were penalized, abused, charged with crimes, had to hire lawyers, in prison, had their homes raided, terrorized by FBI agents who were behind all this stuff. So now, as relevant to the pending motions, Mr. Martin expressed stressed the following. He said, it can't be that the system is stifling the truth from coming out because of some procedure. He says, look, if it's in the manual, if it's the law, look, and we'll pick it up. Let's listen to him. But they're really concerned about, we're going to listen to the clip, and then this is what they're flipped about when he says it. But if they can't be charged, we will name them, and we will name them. And in a culture that respects shame, they should be people that are shamed. We are big fans of shaming these corrupt feds. And that's a fact. That's the way things work. And so that's how I believe the job operates. And so here was Ed Martin explaining that during this press briefing to America.
If it's in the manual, if there's a law, look, I'm the guy that stands here and tells you the January 6th defendants, every one of them wants all their documents back.
Yeah.
They want us to release all the video. And we said that's not how it works. We have to be thoughtful and serious about how the system works. If you want all that information, there is a path. If you're suing about it, there is a way. But we have to be serious about it, just like we have to be serious about getting to the truth. There are some really bad actors, some people that did some really bad things to the American people. And if they can be charged, we'll charge them. But if they can't be charged, we will name them.
Good.
And we will name them. And in a culture that respects shame, they should be people that are shamed. And that's a fact. That's the way things work. And so that's how I believe the job operates.
Nice. So you're not going to escape consequences for your investigatory work. If you abused your position, you'll be held accountable. But now it's a great time to talk about an extraordinarily important topic, and that is how the United States of America is currently making sure its national security isn't compromised. As you know, there are many moving parts from trade to the dollar, but today the focus is on materials, the bedrock of our economy. Without them, the U.S. will find it hard to compete with China or anyone else. That's why President Trump has signed several historic executive orders to protect copper production and mining on U.S. soil. Copper is often called the new oil. It's at the heart of America's future, and people could not be more bullish about it, especially when it's coupled with gold. Copper demand is surging while supply struggles to keep pace. And I'm from Arizona. You know, here we are 10 out of 10 on U.S. copper production. We did a lot of it here in the past. So here's where basic common sense on supply and demand come into play. Global mining production is expected to peak in 2026 with a projected 700,000 ton deficit in 2025 alone. Underinvestment in new mines has created a supply crunch, which is why it might be a good time to start thinking about this sector and metal. The U.S.-China trade war has disrupted global copper supply chains, and China, which controls 50% of global smelting, faces export challenges. The Trump administration's investigation into copper imports is aimed at bolstering national security to be the leading edge in a worldwide revolution in mining. You may have heard guys like Howard Lutnick say things like American industries depend on copper and it should be made in America, no exemptions, no exceptions. Trump has said, I have also imposed a 25% tariff on foreign aluminum, copper, lumber, and steel because if we don't have it, we don't have a military. And frankly, we just won't have a country very long. Trump has also said copper should be made in America. It's time for copper to come home. The fact is, the world is hungry for copper. That's why I want to tell you about Giant Mining, the sponsor of today's video. Not only does it own a copper, silver, gold project in Nevada, but it also recorded its best ever drill intercepts in September 2024. And they've got additional great results even in the past few weeks. And that's great because on February 14th, Executive Order 14213 was issued, and it implicitly prioritizes copper as a critical resource. Nevada, where Giant Mining's copper project is situated, they've constantly ranked among the top mining jurisdictions in the world, which is why I think Giant Mining is so great. And their company balance sheet is now fully funded for its drilling programs in 2025. That means Giant Mining is well positioned to accelerate its exploration efforts and potentially capitalize on emerging copper market opportunities. And with all the market turmoil recently, their share price is actually down 50% since early February. It's also important to note that Giant Mining owns the Majuba Hill Copper Project, a past producing mine. In the past 4 years, management and the company's geologists have actually expanded the copper's deposit, and this past September, Giant Mining hit their best ever drill hole. Historic underground mines at the Majuba Hill project produce copper, tin, and silver from the early 1900s to the 1950s, including 2.8 million pounds of copper, 184,000 ounces of silver, 5,800 ounces of gold, and 21,000 pounds of tin. And the infrastructure is ready. Access roads, power supply, transportation, water, ore stockpiles, processing space, a processing plant. So if you're interested in learning more about copper, do your homework on giant mining. You can find them at ticker BFGFF. Now, Martin's statements, they are freaked, says, and relevant facts, these are worthy of the court's attention. Here's why. First, the statements indicate that Ed Martin, speaking in his capacity as a senior DOJ official and leader of the Weaponization Working Group, has indicated a clear, unmistakable intent to name and shame federal employees if they deserve it, if they acted below the dignity of the office. The plaintiffs who investigated January 6th, he says, well, because that's how he believes the job operates, and he is in that position now. Second, it confirms that DOJ leadership values their version of the, quote, truth coming out over, quote, some procedure. Now, this is particularly relevant here, where Martin is widely known to believe and has publicly stated that the January 6th insurrection was a fraud and a hoax orchestrated by the FBI, which is true. How come they had more undercover agents there than were on trial in the Proud Boys case? In the Proud Boys case, they talked about 8 confidential human sources or undercover agents or Fed adjacent individuals there on January 6th. There were fewer criminal defendants there. They were outnumbered by the feds in their own trial. Third, it indicates that the DOJ leadership is in regular contact with the J6 defendants who are imploring them to release information like the results at issue in this litigation, which is their right. First of all, they were pardoned after being illegally prosecuted, in my opinion, and many others' opinions, in a way that should not have happened to the vast majority of them. And so they have all entitlements under the law for recourse. Now, in sum, the FBI agents, who can't even use their real names, respectfully submit that Martin's recent statements indicate his clear intent to name and shame those. You don't have to repeat it. He said it. The plaintiff is relevant to this court's consideration, i.e. the plaintiffs is relevant to this court's consideration of the issues raised in their filings and discussed at recent preliminary injunction hearings, particularly those issues which relate to the imminence and irreparable harm, right? So they're saying, hey, see, he's going to harm us now. He just said it. And further compounding the threat to our FBI agents is a New York Times report where Pam Bondi has granted Doge and Elon personnel access to the DOJ systems. Oh, man. As this court is aware, the list of the names of FBI personnel who participated in the January 6 investigations exists on the DOJ systems. And that happened after Emil Bove demanded that the FBI give those names to the DOJ. And we remember that demand. Now, the FBI says we submit that our relief that we asked for previously now be granted. Make the DOJ destroy the list of names it created of FBI personnel in addition to issuing an injunction to stop the release of the list outside of the DOJ. Don't give it to Doge. Don't give it to anybody else, because these FBI agents who were patting on themselves on the back not that long ago as American heroes, saving democracy, going after MAGA insurrectionists, remember that crap, are now suddenly freaked out because they know what they've done. So it's going to ensure the safety of the plaintiffs. No one's going to harm them. They're just going to be properly investigated and potentially prosecuted, and if not, shamed for their corrupt behavior. So this comes out, of course, courtesy of Mark S. Zaid, Pamela Keith, Norm Eisen, and the rest of the representatives representing the anonymous FBI John and Jane Does. But they're not done. They're going to strike back against Ed Martin. And of course, in Washington, they're launching an ethics probe into him. They say here from Reuters, ousted top federal prosecutor in Washington is now facing an ethics probe. Of course, that's Ed Martin. They report the lawyer President Trump tapped to serve as Washington, D.C.'s top prosecutor is now facing a professional ethics investigation. According to a letter seen by Reuters, Ed Martin sent a letter to his staff saying the D.C. Office of Disciplinary Counsel is investigating him, and I'm sure he's getting just a slew of complaints. The guy investigating him is called Hamilton Phil Fox. Martin said that he breached the confidentiality of the investigation by sharing a copy of the complaint with the civil division. Martin said, it's an outrage how they treat us, and I'm going to continue to fight against the weaponization of our law licenses against us too. I'm taking on Mr. Fox head on. His conduct is personally insulting and professionally unacceptable. So even when Ed Martin is under attack in DC, Ed Martin not backing down. He'll respond. FBI agents are freaked, and the rest of DC seemingly shook.